And I'm David. We're talking about Davids versus Goliaths. A shocker.
Whoa!
Okay.
This episode!
Yes.
Holy smokes!
Yeah, this was a good tribal,
So good.
and we'll get there.
So good.
But we're starting with the fallout from the previous tribal.
Oh, Angelina.
Angelina is trying to cover those tracks, and nobody's buying it. She's like, wow, I get it now. Wow, Elizabeth was a threat.
She came up to me and like my eyes were big. She could tell, and
Yeah.
I appreciated that she at least admitted to us that this was jury management.
Yeah, she was caught red-handed,
Yeah.
she says, which I'm like, thank you for admitting it.
Thank you. Let's not pretend it was something else. Got it.
Right.
Yes, now you can try to cover your tracks and get back in with the Goliath.
Right. But like, Kara's like, it doesn't make sense because like I saw her go into the woods, to the well with Elizabeth. Like nobody's really believing it, but she's doing her best with that.
Right.
But now Mike is not so concerned with Angelina. He says she's defanged, and he tells Christian that he's more concerned about Gabby.
Right, which you kind of hinted on last week. You were like, well, now is Angelina, she's just so not trustworthy that it's like, do we even care now?
Mm-hmm.
And he seemed more concerned with Gabby at this point, coming from the tribal, which we did talk about, like, why was Gabby so emotional when she was safe?
And she was also voting for Elizabeth.
Yeah, she was voting against her David tribe, yet she was like, they're gonna pick us off one by one.
Yeah.
I kind of was giving her the benefit of the doubt and hoping that it was sort of an act.
Sure.
That she was putting on, like, we need to act like these were David's being picked off.
Yeah.
Even though, so that no one thought she was safe.
Yeah, you can't act safe as a David because you're supposed to be nervous.
Except for me, I'm good.
Right. Then people are like, well, why aren't you nervous?
Why? Yeah.
What kind of deal do you have and with whom? But Christian doesn't really express that, oh, Gabby was just acting. Like, don't worry,
and maybe
she's good.
she wasn't. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
But no one seems to want to ask or whatever. Mike's just pointing out that he's now concerned about her.
Yes.
Which Christian's like, okay.
Mm-hmm. So then they go to the reward challenge and they get to play for pizza.
Wait, before reward.
What?
Davy and Nick are out and about.
Yes.
And they stumble upon a clue. Which this clue does take us back to the merge feast.
Yeah.
When Gabby was like, there has to be something here.
Yes.
And then they left us hanging and didn't show us what it was or where it was.
Yeah.
But I think it was that sign, because that is the clue that they found, that image.
Yeah.
And so they're like, we're looking, we gotta do this.
Right, we gotta find wherever this palm tree is.
Yeah.
Which I would have been like, where's that sign? Like, I mean, it's gotta be behind the sign or something.
That's what I thought too. I was like, go find the sign.
But Davey was like, we gotta find this palm tree that like sticks out from the mountain like this. And I was like, what? How did you even know to look for that?
Good thing they figured that out, because that is not where my brain went.
I know.
I was like, isn't the island full of trees and cliffs and stuff?
Right. So Davey's sort of like, he creates a distraction because people are around.
Well, and they run into Carl by this point.
So they're like wandering down the beach. Nick and Carl go to find the clue while Davey does this like, she's twirling the stick and creating a diversion. And then they find this steal a vote advantage.
Yes.
And then immediately Carl's like,
Carl too.
I also have an idle nullifier. Like, he's just so excited about all the advantages that they have. And I'm like, can no one keep a secret?
But honestly, those two things, the whole vote, like that kind of thing is different than an idol. And I do feel like the Davids could work together to utilize those. So once I realized it wasn't like an idol, I was like, okay, group understanding of all of this is not a horrible thing.
Right, especially when the Davids are so down in numbers.
Right.
You know, so we just gotta have all the information on the table so we can make moves.
And at that point, I'm like, can the Davids even put all this together and make a move? That was my hope and dream at that point.
Right. So then they go to reward.
Now I think we go to reward.
They're playing for pizza, which if I saw pizza after 22, I would be out of my mind. I would be like so excited to have the chance to eat pizza after 22 days of like starving.
Right.
And they all like get a little mini bite of a slice and like that
pizza doesn't, side combo.
Yeah.
Doesn't pizza make you sick on like just a normal night when you have pizza? No, is that just
not me? I think I eat enough pizza that it doesn't make me sick, but
pizza doesn't make me feel well. So when you like don't feed me for 20 something days and then you give me something that doesn't make me feel well, I was like, well, I'll have a couple bites just for sustenance.
Sure, yeah. I could see like the tomato sauce, like maybe giving people heartburn.
Dairy is so.
Dairy does mess with your stomach.
Those people were hiding in the woods for hours after after that pizza. Yes. I guarantee you.
But they were all thrilled because it's 12 pizzas.
I mean, food
for
is
6
food.
people. Like, they're like, oh, we're gonna feast. We need to play for this.
Yeah.
So they're all like holding up these bags, and it's
gosh.
very challenging. Like, you gotta have strong shoulders to do that kind of thing.
Cannot. No.
Yeah.
No.
It was the moment that mattered was when Dan was holding 3 bags, or 5 pounds each. He's holding 15 pounds, balancing it in one hand, and he's kind of like, where y'all at? To the other team, like bragging, and then he drops.
Okay, now here's the thing.
Yeah.
I know we want to be like, okay, Dan, don't be so cocky.
Right,
what?
right.
But he was holding 3 bags for, like, necessity. Like, they were trading off, and the stronger ones needed to hold more. So I didn't want to count him out just for balancing the 3 bags, but...
It just was how he was trying to, like, throw it in the other team's face, and then pride goes before the fall, literally.
It was sloppy. It was sloppy, Dan.
Yeah.
And he paid for it. He clearly was not happy with himself after that.
So what was interesting is it was Mike and Gabby who were team captains, and Gabby's team is the one that wins, and she basically picked the entire strike force.
Pretty
except
much.
for Mike, because he was the captain of the other team.
Right.
So it's the strike force plus John who wins this pizza reward, and they go back, but we don't see too much of the reward because they go into Mike working this Christian angle. And I'm like...
Mike, okay, first off, yes, that.
You better stop.
Mike knows this game.
Yeah.
He knows all of these shows.
Yeah.
I love him. Except now I'm mad at him.
Yeah, exactly. Stop it, Mike.
Oh, Mike, like the one like we're rooting for you and Christian,
dude. Together.
And he's all like, well, if I were watching the show, I'd be rooting for Christian. Christian's gotta go. And I'm like, ah!
I know. He's like looking at it from like a viewer perspective, like trying to convince people like, hello, if we're watching this, we're all rooting for Christian, so we gotta get him out, people. Like, he could beat any of us in the end. Now, Angelina's like, is this not what I said like 2 days ago? And she's right, but I think she said it differently than Mike said it.
Yeah, Angelina, hear me out, girl. I would love nothing more to get on my feminist soapbox with you and be like, when a man says that, people listen. But that ain't what happened here, honey. You've come on way too strong. And people didn't want to vote Christian out because you told them to.
Right, because you have come off a little self-serving, and so when you suggest something, people are like, well, is this only going to benefit you? Like, how does this really benefit me? But I think Mike is a little less so that, and so when he says it might come off like, I'm thinking about the group here. I don't know all the reasons, and you know, we don't see the full picture, but she's a little bit annoyed, but of course she's also nervous because they're saying, well, Angelina, you're the fake target. Like, we have to tell the Davids that we're voting you.
Right, which does make sense because people are, if they've heard otherwise, they would be like, wait, what's really going on?
Exactly.
If everyone acts like, obviously, Angelina, then no one's going to question, and we go about our business.
And the Davids will be thrilled because that's a Goliath, right? So they'll 100% go along with a plan like that.
So I'm obviously scared.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, is this the time we're going to have a puzzle immunity? Because Christian needs it.
Yeah, right. And we're all expecting this brochacho blindside because that was teased in the previous week's episode. I'm like, this needs to not be Christian. Like, I don't want to see him go this early.
Okay, we go to immunity.
Okay, so now of course I'm rooting for Christian.
And I see it's not a puzzle.
And it's not. And I'm like, there's
Christian
no way.
ain't gonna have,
So it's one that we've seen before where they're balancing the ball in between the rods.
It went super quick this time.
Very quickly. Like Brad Culpepper, I think Jeff was saying he lasted like 23 minutes.
Yeah. I felt like this lasted like 10 minutes.
Oh yeah, like in 3 minutes. 15? Most people were gone.
Yeah.
And it comes down to Angelina and Dan, which could be great for Angelina because she's this fake target this week.
At this moment, I'm so worried about the Davids that I'm like, if Angelina doesn't win immunity, like she needs to win immunity so that they know she's not an option.
Right.
And then their wheels would spin and maybe come up with another plan.
And they're considering all options at that point because Angelina's an obvious choice, but if she's off the table, then they really will like pick everything apart, right? But she doesn't win.
That doesn't happen.
Dan wins.
Dan wins. Angelina falls.
So now when we go back to camp, this Christian blindside is on.
Full on.
That's what people are strategizing about.
Figuring it out, how it's going to go down. And Angelina expresses her concern.
What if Christian has
an idol? What ifs?
And Dan's like, girl, don't worry, I'll play my idol for you. Like, I don't want you to go home. But then 2 seconds later, he's like, we're all good with Angelina going home, right? Like,
he's like, do I really play my idol?
If Christian has an idol, we just like sacrifice Angelina. We're all okay with that, right?
Right?
And everyone's like, yeah, sure.
Now, Alec, my shady little friend.
Yes, yeah. He's not ready to turn on this Strike Force alliance the way that Mike is.
Yes.
He wants to keep Christian around because he recognizes, like, look, I need it to look like I'm Goliath strong, but I don't need to necessarily be Goliath strong.
Yes, so he can't make a big scene. He can't vote to keep Christian. Like, he can't show his cards, but he can talk to a David.
That's right. He can pass on a little knowledge.
And he is comfortable with our boy Nick.
Yes. Who quickly is like finding himself at the center of the game.
Center of it all. He is a pivotal player, and I don't think anybody knows it.
Yeah, right.
So Alec reveals some info to Nick.
He says a Christian blindside is in the works here.
And now Nick's like, well, what do I do?
Right.
Well, luckily, he's in the middle of knowing about Davy's
He knows about
They've just found together.
Yeah. And doesn't he also, it seems like he knew about Davy's idol too. Is that true?
He didn't.
Okay.
But we'll talk about this later because he obviously did at some point.
Right.
But he doesn't when he goes to talk about the advantage.
Right. Because, he just mentions the steal a vote plan to Davy, saying if we steal this vote, maybe we can get a 6-6 situation, and like, this is our best option.
And I love the way Nick approaches Davy. Nick doesn't come off like a leader. Like, here's a plan. Here's what we gotta do.
We have to do this.
He's like,
is there a
I'm
world?
Worried about Christian.
Yeah.
I think they're coming after Christian. It does seem like they're knocking us off one by one. Like, having this conversation with Davy, would it be possible to use this vote or steal a vote advantage that they found? It was just a great conversation.
It was so smooth.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, Davy, we gotta use the steal a vote on Christian.
We're in trouble. They're coming after us.
Right. He was like, is there a world where you would use this on Christian? Like, what do you think? How does that make you feel? So he makes it feel like it's Davy's decision. Yeah. But it really, like, he's angling for this plan very clearly.
And making good points.
Right. He wants to keep Mason-Dixon alive, so.
Now, to us, to camera, Davy's like, really, the only way to make this work is for me to use my idol. And I'm like, no, Davy.
Don't.
Don't use your idol.
Look. I would love that because I love Christian, but I don't think that's best for your game.
Right.
Okay? You need to save that for yourself.
Yes. Nobody knows about it. Oh my gosh. Like, now I'm freaking out.
And also, like, Davy is not on people's radar at this point. Mike makes a comment earlier in the episode about how, well, Davy and Carl are not going to mount an insurrection. Right. So they're clearly just, like, there, and Goliaths are not going to start picking David's off of Davy or Carl. So they're in a pretty good position.
But Davy points out, like, if we use the steal a vote, we're just really tying it. So then it's 6-6 is what this vote would come down to, Christian versus Angelina. That doesn't really help us. So we go to Tribal, and I am just straight terrified. Yeah. I don't see how this is gonna work out. No. Is Christian really in danger? Like, what's really happening here? I'm scared.
I just never see Davy using that idol. I'm like, that's ridiculous.
No, that's
like
a horrible idea.
The producers made you say that.
Yeah,
made you say that, but like, you're not actually gonna use the idol. That's ludicrous. Now, immediately I'm like, well, the Christian blindside is off because the whole Tribal is about Christian and how he's a threat. Yeah. And Angelina's trying to like squarely place, the biggest threat in the game on Christian's back, and he's like trying to push back on that against Angelina. So I'm like, well, if Christian gets eliminated at this point, he's not going to be blindsided. That's not happening.
I mean, as they do, they're like, and how do you feel at this Tribal? And he's like, I'm scared. Yeah. It's like, obviously producers are like, they're talking about Christian. Ask him. And Christian's like, I'm worried. I guess I'm a target. I'm like, Christian never thought he was a target or a threat. Never in his life has he thought he was a threat.
And even some of the other Davids, like, remember in the conversation with Davy and Nick, like, they don't really think Christian's a threat. Like, Davy was like, Christian's not really been doing anything.
Why are they going after Christian?
Yeah, so, I think we know he's a threat just because people are, like, rooting for him and he's likable, but
Which is where Mike is coming from. Right. But when you're sitting on the team with him, you're like, so we can win the puzzle stuff. Right. That's it.
Right. So it's mostly about Christian, this Tribal Council.
Oh my gosh. But a little about Angelina.
A little bit,
Angelina,
of course.
you didn't come across so great last time. Are you worried about you? And she's like, well, yeah, but, you know, we have an alliance.
Right. Then they go to vote.
Okay.
And things get interesting.
I am sweating. I am stressed.
And I knew.
What in the world is going down? Davey looks like he's contemplating constantly.
Yes.
Like he looks like he's listening to everything and thinking and stressing.
Yeah.
Christian looks like he's stressing.
Yeah.
I'm blindsided. Like, I don't know what's happening, right?
Well, the only thing I suspected was when I saw it was a 10-minute tribal council, I was like, stuff's about to go down.
Well,
all right. We have a lot of time left in this episode, so these things are going to get interesting. And they certainly do when Jeff asks for an idol. And Davey decides to play his idol. First of all, nobody knew about it. So he stood up, and that's like the perfect way to play an idol when nobody knows about it. So people are like, what? Huh? Then he gets up.
Even Christian.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, we'll talk more at the end here, but at this moment, Christian's like, what?
Yeah, right.
And then Davey's like, here it is.
Right. And I would like to say a few words.
Yeah. I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about Christian.
So this is for Christian.
And Christian's like, what?
Thank you. Right.
Yeah. So I'm with Christian. I'm like, what? Oh my God. Davey played it up his idol. Oh my gosh.
Cut to Angelina. Dan.
Dan.
You have to. Dan, please.
Little reminiscent to a jacket situation, but a little more important with an idol.
Yeah.
And Dan does like a
You can tell he's like, I don't want to use this.
Yeah.
But I've got to.
Angelina's got no shame, and she's like, Dan, idol.
Right.
Idol Dan.
Then after he finally decides to play it, she has the nerve to be like, did you say who it was for? I was like, Angelina, yes, he did, okay?
Yes, oh my gosh.
She needs to make sure that safety is guaranteed. Gosh. And if she does it,
so I'm like, oh my, as soon as Dan stands up, I'm like, no!
Yeah.
Like yelling and
because I'm
out.
thinking it's going to be a wash.
Yeah.
All the votes are going to be for Christian and Angelina.
Yeah.
And
5-7, yeah.
Right, and they're now both going to be safe, and we're going to have to re-vote, and it's going to be a whole thing. But that's not what happens.
Okay, well, some people knew a little bit more than we did.
Yeah.
But I'm mad at Dan. I can't believe he played it, but then also he's got 2 idols, and people don't know about the second one. So like, really, what does it matter?
Right.
So he plays the idol, and he looks good for the Goliath.
Right, exactly.
And Angelina's like, my angel.
Yeah.
So now we're reading the votes. And those producers, man, they love to stack those votes. Yeah. So we see all of Christian's first.
Votes.
Then we see some Angelinas. Don't count. And then boom. John. I'm like, what?
Did not see it coming. And his face is like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh. I mean, clearly not the Davids, because they all knew that this plan was going to happen, but people are just like, what? And then the next vote is read, John, and because there's only 3 votes left, so once he gets the second vote, 2 out of 3, he's gone. Out of nowhere. And he is such a good sport about it. He was like, wow, you guys got me. And people are like, oh my God, I'm so sad to see you go. But like, that was an amazing blindside.
Like, still. Like, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Now, you did mention earlier, there was a little hint that they were like, we feel like Dan, the Davey and Nick conversation.
Yeah.
We feel like Dan is the leader here.
Yeah.
Incorrect, but okay. We need to weaken Dan.
Right. And voting out Angelina is not going to weaken Dan, because nobody trusts her at this point.
John is Dan's
number one ally.
Go-to.
Yeah.
So, okay, that was the hint on why it was John, but how the heck we got to a plan where they were going to split their votes and go to John completely threw me, and I had to like rack my brain for a while.
Right.
There had to have been more of a conversation. They had to have brought Christian in, and Davey had to say, I'm going to play my idol for you.
Right.
Which in that case, Christian is a darn good actor. Because
I
was like, he was like, wait, what, for me?
Yeah.
Oh my God. What? Oh my God. He was like all over the map.
Yes.
And I was like, wait, you knew about this? They had to say, okay, we're going to play an idol and we need to split votes, which means Alec must have leaked to Nick that Dan might play an idol for Angelina. Like, all of that information had to have come out for this plan to have played out like this.
Exactly. Because if they went in with the steal a vote plan, it would have been unanimous on the David side, right? Don't you guys think?
Right. Because you can't afford to split your votes if you're trying to get close to their vote. The best you could do is
orchestrate a tie. Exactly. So Christian had to know that they were going to play an idol for him, and that they basically got to split their votes and just sort of choose, one or the other that was going to get eliminated regardless of how Dan played his idol.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm bummed that we missed out on those combos, and I hope we get enlightened on some of that.
Right.
But also, I understand for editing the way that they left it for us and it played out for us.
It was so great.
Phenomenal.
Yes, and the best part about the whole situation, I mean, really, it was like equally a blindside on Dan as it was on John, right?
Yes.
And the best part is that Dan completely wasted his idol because it was 3 votes for John and 2 for Angelina, so she was never going to go home. John was going to go home with 3 votes, even if Angelina didn't have an idol played for her. So that was a complete waste.
Oops.
Sorry about it. And Dan's gonna be mad.
Yeah.
He's gonna be so mad at Angelina.
Yeah. I'm bummed to see John go. I had no problems with John, but
he was a threat. They were smart to get him out.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, to save Christian, honestly, fine.
Yeah, worth it.
Totally worth it.
And it was great that John was like, it's going to be a brochacho blindside, and then he's the one who got blindsided. He was like,
but I didn't realize it was going to be me brochacho blindside. I'm so proud of the Davids for figuring something out.
Oh my God.
That was so exciting.
Proud of Nick for somehow convincing Davey to play an idol that he could have saved for himself easily.
Right. If you get a group of the Davids together and they realize and talk together about how, the Goliaths are actually knocking us off one by one, you have to protect yourselves as a group, right? Like, that's going to make you... Even if you're not super aligned, and honestly, we don't know, like, editing hasn't really shown us, like, who's aligned on the Davids.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know if Davey and Nick are close, but now they are.
Now they are.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, they had to work together to say, well, I might be next if we don't stop the Goliath. And oh my gosh, they stopped the Goliath.
I know.
This is phenomenal.
Yes.
So exciting.
It really is like so on message with the theme of this season. Like 7 to 5 and somehow they orchestrate a blindside and get a Goliath out. Like, that's crazy.
And they got a big one out.
Yeah. And I was a little bit, I have to say, I was happy to see John go over Angelina only because we're down to 4 women left in this game.
Yeah, I didn't even realize.
I didn't want to see like all the women picked off and on the jury and then it's just a bunch of dudes fighting it out. Like, let's keep a little bit of diversity in there, people. So I was sad to see John go because I liked him as a character, but not heartbroken, I'll say it that way.
Here's the thing that I found interesting, because like obviously we were disappointed in the way that Mike like changed his thought.
Yeah.
Only because it goes against ours, but we understand. Alec is a stronger Goliath.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense for him to scoop up some Davids for his little army.
Yeah.
Mike is not a strong Goliath. No. So it makes sense for him to stick with the Goliath to protect him.
Yeah.
So I totally see how they're in different places and it makes sense for their game. Yeah. Even though it doesn't, like, they're technically working together, but that's not going to work together. Yeah. Like, that's not going to work.
Right.
They don't have the same mutual goals.
Yeah. But this was a great episode. Our first, like, really satisfying blindside of the season.
Does this give, like, the Davids a push?
Right.
Like, do they take it from here?
Listen, I think this puts Davey on people's radars in not a great way for his game. I think things are going to come back and bite Mike in the butt a little bit because he tried to orchestrate this Christian situation, so maybe now the strike force is off. People are going to start talking, right? Because this is, like, a huge... shock to the whole tribe, and information's gonna get around, and I can't wait to see the fallout from all that. Yeah,
I do feel like more people are gonna sort of rise to the surface. Like, Angelina's gonna be swept under the rug a little bit. We'll get her later kind of vibe, while people take notice of some other Davids, maybe some other Goliaths, like who we should be getting out. I mean, just more for us to love.
Exactly.
Crazy.
So good.
So good. What do you guys think? I'm sure that you loved this tribal, but please tell me all about it.
Yes, let us know what you think, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.